All right, so we're streaming. Okay, so what's the goal for today? This is I titled this video "Glimpse Stream" for talking about glimpses. So that is where we're headed. Glimpses. What are glimpses? That's the first question. What are we talking about? We're talking about what's really a kind of experience associated with mystical experience. A kind of mystical experience is what we're talking about. And we're talking about how, where, when we can find this kind of special mystical experience in literature. That's the question. How has it been captured? Has it been described in nonfiction and fiction works? And it's an interesting thing to be talking about mystical experiences from a sort of non-mystical, non-religious framework. Well, I guess I shouldn't say it's from a non-mystical framework. That would be self-contradictory. But from a non-religious framework is what I meant to say. So we're talking about mystical experiences in this video. We're talking about mystical experiences, glimpses, which is I think is a particular type of mystical experience. So we're going to get into how we might define that. We'll get into the discussion of what exactly it looks like and what exactly we're talking about as we go on. But we're talking about a particular type of mystical experience and exploring how that's been described and portrayed in literature. And yeah, as I was saying, coming at this from a non-religious perspective, from a sort of universalistic perspective, is an interesting task. On the one hand, sort of divorcing glimpses from a religious context, which is to say, divorcing a particular kind of mystical experience from a religious context, is something which could very easily offend religious people, people with religious sensibilities. They feel that the mystical experience, they might often feel that the mystical experience is something that belongs very much to the realm of religion. There's a sense in which the mystical experience is an experience of the divine, of God, not just any God, but usually a very particular God, depending on the person's religious perspective. And so there's sort of this danger here of talking about glimpses, talking about mystical experiences divorced from religion, because the danger here is upsetting, alienating people who feel that a glimpse or a religious experience, a mystical experience, belongs solely to religion or to a relationship, a relational kind of encounter with the divine, with a particular God. And so that's a risk that I run, in having this discussion, because that's not my framework. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from much more open, like I said, non-denominational, non-specific kind of perspective on this experience, on this universal human experience. The other danger that I run is from the opposite side of the coin, right? The other danger that I have to, be cognizant of, wary of, is upsetting people who are atheistic and anti-religious. Because part of what I think we're going to find, if we look, is that although glimpses don't necessarily belong exclusively to the world of religion, a lot, I think, of what religion offers people, a lot of what religion seems to do for people, is provide a kind of framework, provide a kind of language, a kind of often techniques for accessing, for thinking about, for tapping into these kind of mystical experiences. So in a way, from another perspective, what this conversation is about, diving into, let me lower my mic here to pay attention to my audio levels. From another perspective, what this conversation is about is sort of explaining or justifying a lot of religious thinking, a lot of religious discourse. And that, of course, is likely to offend, to upset, to alienate people who are anti-religious. And so that is the danger. That is the tricky road that I see myself walking here, where in exploring glimpses from a non-religious perspective, on the one hand, we're divorcing it from its religious context, where certain people feel it belongs, it should be kept, and also we're, I think, potentially justifying a lot of religious experience justifying a main reason, a primary reason why a lot of people are so connected to their religions and to their religious rituals and doctrines and communities, because it lets them tap into something. And that is also part of what this discussion is about. So we're walking a fine line here. I imagine I will upset all different people in the process of trying to have this discussion. For that, I apologize. Feel free, of course, to chime in the comments, as always, about this topic, about your experience with glimpses, or any other topic for that matter. I'm happy to, follow the chat. But let's jump right in. Okay, let's jump right in. Let's pull up ChatGPT. Is a good place to start these days for all sorts of discussions. Let's pull up ChatGPT and let's ask just ChatGPT here and see what we get. What is a glimpse? With respect, what is a glimpse? I'm specifically interested in its mystical, in the mystical connotation of that word, of the word. Connotation and usage of that word. All right, so let's see what ChatGPT has to say. So, the term glimpse in everyday language generally refers to a brief or partial view or experience of something. However, within mystical or spiritual contexts, glimpse often signifies a brief revelatory experience that offers a fleeting look into a deeper reality, spiritual truth, or transcendent state. This sort of glimpse is considered significant because it can provide a profound shift in perception or understanding, even though it might be temporary or difficult to articulate, right? We're already hitting upon some of these key points that we're going to keep coming back to as we explore different definitions, different expressions of what we're talking about. So, of course, from the word itself, there's a deep sense of the fleeting nature of the glimpse, the sense of hitting onto something which is very profound and important. Let's see here. The idea that something transformative yet transient, right? Where, of course, this is the theme we're going to keep coming back to. Moving on. The idea is that a glimpse can serve as a catalyst for spiritual growth, opening up the individual to new possibilities of being and understanding period. At the same time, the fleeting nature of the experience serves as a reminder of the limitations of ordinary human perception and the ineffable quality of spiritual truths. Here are some ways that glimpses use mystical content. Okay, great. So that is ChatGPT's definition of a glimpse. All right. Dexter says, hi, I know this is a little out of context, but I want to start philosophy studies on my own. How should I start? Great question, Dexter. I have to think about that one. I'm not the best person to ask. There's lots of great philosophy channels on YouTube. I'm not going to try to call them out now because I'll miss some or whatever. There's lots of great small philosophy channels on YouTube, and they would be much better resources for reaching out to for that kind of question. Barklord, have I read Piranesi? No, I have not read Piranesi, but I'm curious what that is. Let's pull it up. What is Piranesi? It's a novel. Piranesi. Okay. No, I've not read it. Looks interesting. All right, let's come back here. So where do we go? Where's our starting point? Where should the first stop be for thinking about glimpses? So the first place I want to go to is, of course, the Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. So Varieties of Religious Experience, full text. So this, of course, William James is the great perennialist. So he was a psychologist. He was interested in, he was lecturing on human psychology. And he was, of course, interested in religious experience and the psychology of religious experience. And he's associated with this trend in thought called perennialism, which suggests this this perspective that there's a sort of universal baseline, fundamental, mystical, spiritual kind of experience that all human beings have access to, and that all the different religions of the world are variations, are different languages, are different expressions, are different modalities of something which is really universal. This is a very contentious perspective. Personally, just to put my cards on the table, I will share with you that I'm very attracted to perennialism and to this perspective. But in modern scholarship, the more I read, the more I see and hear people lecture about these topics, I see a huge backlash against perennialism. A sense that perennialism risks ignoring, glossing over, rejecting the diversity of human thought and religious thought and philosophical thought, and that instead of focusing on the commonalities is much more fruitful and much more authentic and true to the people involved and to the texts involved, to focus on the differences between different theologies and religions and philosophical schools and on and on. So that's where we're talking about William James. He's a perennialist, and I'm interested in his section in this book, this wonderful book, which has tons of cases, tons of explorations of the way in which religion and mysticism and spirituality manifest in all different forms, and the psychological implications, the psychological conclusions he tries to draw from these sort of testimonies of different people. So he has a section on, I guess this is it, mysticism. This is it, mysticism. Yeah, here we go. And this is specifically, really, it shouldn't be called mysticism. It should be called mystical experiences. Okay, this is what these lectures are. Lectures 16 and 17. This is the lectures on mystical experiences. And he's going to talk about what is the mystical experience. And he's going to define for us, he's going to give us characteristics of the mystical experience. And he's going to give us specific examples of mystical experience. And this will sort of lead us on our journey. Will open the door for us. Will start us off as we start exploring, looking for mystical experiences in literature. Let me just check in with the comments here. Glimpsing in from Ireland, the contemplative life can offer brief glimpses of otherness. It's Jason. Hi, Jason. It's wonderful to see you. Long time no see. Yes, absolutely true. And that has absolutely been my experience, and this is why I've become interested in this topic. And so I'm excited to explore this topic in this live stream with you guys. So yeah, greetings from country Donegal. And then, so Dexter says, I'm currently highly interested in Dostoevsky's work. Yes, I am also highly interested in Dostoevsky's work. I recommend him. Okay, so William James, Variety of Mystical Experience. So he's going to start off by defining what is a mystical experience. And he gives 4 characteristics. We're not going to read all this, of course, but we could just notice what he's talking about. Ineffability. So this, he says, the hand use of the marks which I classify as state of mind is mystical is negative. The subject of it immediately says that it defies expression. Okay, this is crucial, right? So let's go to our notes here. We could say, characteristics, characteristics, and we could say, ineffability is the big one, which is that it defies expression. Number 2 is this noetic quality, the sense that there is an insight. There's a sense that there's something gained. There's a sense of a kind of transmission of knowledge, or a transmission of a kind of deeper understanding, which was not there before. And so we can write noetic quality. And this is a little tedious, I think, to go back and forth like this, but that's okay. Transiency. And then the 4th is passivity. So transiency, of course, meaning that short, it's just a glimpse, and then passivity. So those are William James's 4, and he goes on to give some really wonderful stories and case studies, and it would be I loved reading this. For the purposes of this live stream, I'm hesitant always to dive into reading other people's texts because it feels like a rabbit hole where I don't know, it can get boring for the viewer pretty fast. So. But I mean, look what he draws from. The first thing to notice here is the number of quotes, right? It's so rich of testimony. It's so rich of experiences and poetry of William James drawing from other streams of thought, other writers, and expressing the commonality of this experience, the pervasiveness, the reality of this experience. So he quotes, for example, well-known passage from Walt Whitman is a classic expression of this sporadic type of mystical experience, right? So we say this is a glimpse, okay? This is, according to William James, this is a glimpse from Walt Whitman. I believe in you, my soul. Loaf with me on the grass, loose the stop from your throat, only the lull I like, the hum of your valve voice. I mind how once we lay, such a transparent summer morning, swiftly arose and spread around me the peace and knowledge that pass all the argument of the earth, and I know that the hand of God is the promise of my own, and I know that the Spirit of God is a brother of my own, and that all the men ever born are also my brothers and women and my sisters and lovers, and that a kelson of the creation is love. I don't know what kelson means. a centerline structure running the length of a ship. Interesting. So it's part of a ship's architecture. Anyway, this is a glimpse, right? This is one of the glimpses that William James has collected. What do we mean it's a glimpse? We mean it's someone expressing a deep sense of connection, right? I would add that to our list here. So we have noetic quality. We have transient. I'm going to leave out passivity because I'm not interested in the passivity aspect of a glimpse. That doesn't really resonate with the definition that I'm more interested in. But I would say a deep sense of connection, I think is a characteristic that we see a lot, and we're going to see more as we look at more specific examples. But a deep sense of connection is common. This is not to say this has to be there, of course, but it's common in sort of the examples I think we're going to look at. Another element of the glimpse is like a sense of quietness. I think actually, Jason may have gestured at this when he said, the way the contemplative life offers brief glimpses of otherness, right? This sense of tapping into quietness, tapping in, to meditation, contemplation, space. This is another, I think, characteristic of glimpses that we're going to keep seeing as we go on looking at other examples. So I was asked by Dexter to define the noetic quality a little bit more. So it's tough for me. We could define the word noetic, right? Noetic means relating to knowledge, from what I understand, right? We can fact check me. Noetic definition. I think it means relating to knowledge, right? Mental activity or the intellect. So it means that there's so that's the definition of the word. So what do I mean in the context of a glimpse? It's more than just an aesthetic experience, right? Because I think one of the things that we could see, is certainly by introspection or by reading, is that there seems to be a relationship between the aesthetic experience and the glimpse. When something is overwhelmingly beautiful, it's like a kind of a glimpse in a way. But the aesthetic experience seems to me, at least, this is subjective, I guess, and we're speculating here together, but it seems to lack that noetic quality. It doesn't seem to really impart any information about the world, right? Because if you're listening to a beautiful Beethoven sonata or some beautiful piece of music, or you see an amazing piece of artwork, it can be overwhelming. It can really tap into this kind of innate, mystical, experiential quality. But a glimpse is a little bit more than that. It's more than just seeing a beautiful painting. It's like you have a deeper understanding of ultimate reality, in some sense. I think you walk away feeling that you've learned something, and I think we'll dive a little more deeply into what that is as we talk about specific examples, and as we sort of develop this notion. So that's to respond to you, Dexter, about defining more about noetic quality. Great question, and yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. We'll see where that leads us as we continue to explore specific examples. But so many amazing testimonies here. Each one of these are fascinating, and I don't want to get lost in the weeds of going through all of them. But like here, the prime characteristic of cosmic consciousness is a consciousness of the cosmos, right? So there's this expansiveness to consciousness that seems to be transmitted, right? So, okay, cool. So I'll come back to the comments going on later. So anyway, he continues. Consciousness of the cosmos, that is, of the life and the order of the universe. Along with the consciousness of the cosmos, there occurs an intellectual enlightenment which alone would place an individual on a new plane of existence, right? So there you see the noetic quality. The spiritual life. This is another quote. The writer adds, what writer is this? Autobiographer. So this is, I would easily give more instances, but one I'll take from the autobiography of J. Trevor. I'm trying to sort of contextualize myself here as I quickly skim this. The spiritual life, he writes, justifies to those who live in it, but what can we say about... All right, so I'm not going to read this now. In preparation for this video, I read through all of these. And I loved it, but it's I think too much to do it now. I just recommend it as an exercise to the reader to read these examples of glimpses. But we're gonna take our exploration elsewhere and look to other texts for more glimpses. Let me try to catch up here quickly on the comments. Noetic sort of Platonic word meaning intuitive and comprehensive recognition beyond language. Right, beautiful. Thank you, Barco. That's actually very helpful. Yeah, beyond language is crucial. I think that's something I left out here. Ineffability, we meant not expressible in language, and this is key in language. It's part of why it's so interesting to explore the presentation of glimpses in literature from my perspective is because by definition, glimpses sort of defy language, right? That's the point. That's what makes it so interesting. That's what makes it so hard, and I think often quite rare, and why I'm sort of proud to have found these sort of cases which I want to share with you. Because we're talking about language you can't really put into words. Like, that's the point. And the fact that you can't put it into words, the way in which people try to put it into words is, I think, a really fascinating exercise and experience. Okay, what else we have here? Too good to be true or real. Interesting. Right? Blake and Dante are good examples of noetic mystics, right? Whose work is littered with glimpses. Yes, beautiful. I'm not so well versed in either Blake or Dante, but I absolutely know that to be true from what I have seen and what I've read about them. But that is, yes, that is absolutely helpful for this exploration. Okay, so let me now. I have notes on my other screen, so I'm going to just consult my notes to figure out where we should go next. So let's look at one beautiful, just really beautiful, famous example of a poetic description of a glimpse that I think is just a great way to sort of draw some of these themes. It's very short and it's really beautiful. So it's called The Lost Chord. It's a song. You can go to Wikipedia, and it's a song by Arthur Sullivan from 1877, and it was written at the bedside of his brother Fred during Fred's last illness. So this is a few days before his brother died, and you can imagine the sort of inner emotional turmoil that a person is going through at this time. Anyone who's been at the bedside of a dying person, a loved one, knows can imagine what that's like, and even those who haven't, to some extent, can try to imagine. And he wrote this poem, and I think this poem touches on a lot of these themes of the glimpse. So, I'm not going to sing it, obviously. It's a beautiful song, but we're just going to read it. Seated one day at the organ, I was weary and ill at ease, right? So there's sort of this sense of understatement there. This is a glimpse which is born out of real suffering. And I think that's another, characteristic we can add to the list when we finish this. There's a sense in which sometimes the glimpse seems to be the other end of suffering. And so there's this deep weariness. He's deeply ill at ease. And my fingers wandered idly over the noisy keys. I know not what I was playing or what I was dreaming then, but I struck one chord of music like the sound of a great amen, right? So again, there's this connection here between the aesthetic experience and the glimpse. There seems to be some overlap between those two experiences. So he strikes a chord of music like the sound of a great amen. It flooded the crimson twilight like the close of an angel's psalm, and it lay on my fevered spirit with a touch of infinite calm. So other characteristics, right? The tapping into the infinite, the tapping into something beyond our physical realm, and the calming, this calming perspective. It quieted pain and sorrow like love overcoming strife. It seemed the harmonious echo from our discordant life. It linked all perplexed meanings, right? There's the noetic quality there. It brought sense to the world to some extent, into one perfect peace, right? The word peace is crucial and common, and trembled away into silence as if it were loth to cease, right? The silence of the glimpse that emerges, it's a sort of a silencing, or it's found in silence. And then this other piece, I have sought, but I seek it vainly, that one lost chord divine. Often we'll see in this game of glimpses, there's this seeking that emerges from it, right? There's this search for the glimpse. Once it's gone, there's like a hole left, which came from the soul of the organ and entered into mine. It may be that death's bright angel will speak in that chord again. It may be that only in heaven I shall hear that grand amen. And again, this is a common theme among glimpses, that you'll find the glimpse in death. That the fact that it's infinite, it's beyond our comprehension, beyond our physical universe. There's this implication. It points to like something beyond this world, the afterlife, perhaps. So that, I think, is a beautiful example of a glimpse. Let's add a section here for examples, and we'll say Arthur Sullivan. The Lost Chord, and we can sort of maybe add some other characteristics here. Of course, none of these are necessary, but they're just sort of like I said, characteristic. A sense of the infinite. Contact, a sense of contact with the infinite. and a sense of loss, when it's gone. And this ties into the transient nature, of course, of the characters. So this is really a beautiful poem and a beautiful song. It's something that I think cuts to the heart of a description of really what we're talking about. And this is the first example of many examples that I want to look at, or at least a handful of examples. But let me just quickly check in with the comments here. Do you think that the main character in Borges' God's script story goes through something similar? I have not read Borges' God's script story, amazingly. That's got to be one of the few that I have not read yet. Oh, I have read it. Oh, is that the one with... let me pull that up. I think I have read that, actually. There's a story where he sees God's writing on the tiger. But let me see what story. Borges, let's do Borges, God's script. But Borges is going to come up in this discussion. I do have Borges on my list of texts that I want to look at when it comes to glimpses. But what is God's script story? The writing of the God. Yeah, isn't this the tiger? I believe that, yeah. I believe yes. I read this, of course. So what's the question? It goes through saying, yeah, I think so. I think Borges is very in touch with glimpses. Absolutely. I think what makes Borges such a unique and beautiful writer is that he's writing with this sensibility deep in his heart and soul. And that's one example, and I have a few others that I want to look at specifically as we go forward in this inquiry. But absolutely, yeah. So yeah, just the plot summary is yeah, he's able to understand the patterns on the jaguar's fur, and it's like the writing of the god. Yeah. Okay, it's a very, very short story. So one of Borges' specialties is the super short, beautiful story. If I remember correctly, I mean, you'll correct me, Manahill, but I think it's just like a paragraph or two, the whole story. Anyway, yeah, this is the story of the man who wants to know about the secret word that God has sent to end suffering. He learns about the world and comes to an epiphany, right? Of course, yes. And yeah, Borges has a deep intuition about these epiphanies, and also the name of God is like a theme that comes up. Putting into language what can't be put into language, right? That's what Borges is all about. This is what this inquiry, this is what this discussion, this whole live stream is all about, right? Language, wrestling with what can't be put into language, you know? Okay, great. So where should we go next? Let's talk about the Book of Job. Let's pull up Book of Job, chapter 38. So we all know, whether or not we've read it cover to cover, we all know more or less what the Book of Job is about. It's a man, who suffers. God causes him to suffer to test him. Job is this righteous man who suffers, and he has these visitors, whatever. Book of Job has an ending. God appears at the end of the Book of Job to sort of respond or to enlighten Job after he's gone through this sort of horrendous ordeal. Let me take a quick drink, and we will look at chapter 38. It's super hot in my attic these days. We're having a bit of a heat wave on the East Coast. All right, chapter 38 of the Book of Job is where God comes out of the whirlwind. This translation, New International Version, says storm. What are the translations we have here? Should we look for the King James? How would I find it? Here, try the King James Version. Yeah, right. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, right? This is after Job has suffered and he's complained and he's been, his friends weren't helpful. I'm just gonna. I have to respond to a quick text. Sorry, guys. Yes. Sorry about this. Let's take 1 second. This is related to kids getting home from school. This is the kind of thing that happens when you have young kids in school. Okay. Okay. Okay, sweet. Okay, good. I'm back. So anyway, so this is the response that Job gets after suffering tremendously, and God is now going to sort of give us the answer to the problem of evil, right? The problem of theodicy, the problem of why do the good people suffer. This is the answer, right? This is the answer that we're all waiting for. So the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is that darketh counsel by words without knowledge?" Right? So he's saying you're an idiot. You know what you're talking about. What, you're darkening counsel. It's the biggest insult you can give someone. Your words are without knowledge. Gird up now thy loins like a man. Okay, you're complaining because you're suffering. Gird up your loins, be a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou to me. I'm going to give you the answer now to your problem, to your suffering. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hast laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Who has stretched the line upon it? Okay, right? Let's go back to the other translation. But God's saying, you don't know where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? You know, who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched the measuring line across it? On what footings was it set? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? Excuse me. And I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness. When I fixed limits for it, and on and on. And this is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful poetic writing. And it goes on for chapters. I think it goes on for about 4 chapters, approximately. There might be some other stuff in there interspersed. But this is a long section where God's majesty just sort of spills out over the page. And this is apparently, in the world of the book, this is the answer, right? This is the answer to the problem of evil. This is the answer to theodicy. This is the answer to the problem of suffering. The answer is this comprehension of the infinite, of the infinity of creation. That's what, seems to be going on here. Of course, there could be other readings, there could be other interpretations, but to me, what I see in this is a glimpse, right? That, like we saw in the Lost Chord, there's this process of suffering, this experience of privation, where on the other end of that experience is kind of a tapping into the infinite grandeur of God or the world or the universe or just reality. And in that moment, there's a shrinking of the human, so to speak. This is very rough. This is very rough metaphorical language. I mean, we're talking about something which you can't really talk about. We're trying to put into words something that doesn't really fit into language. But there's a kind of a shrinking of the self, of the person, of the individual, and of that whole story, and of that whole suffering experience. That all that remains is the glimpse. All that remains is, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their season, or lead out the bear with its cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over earth? And on and on and on. All right. Reading, I think that the irony of Job is that God undermines his own power in his answer. God should be able to do all these things simultaneously. Yeah, I think what God is saying is right. So I guess I hear what you're saying, Menhill. But I think of it from the experience of Job, and an experience of that infinity, the infinity of creation. There is a beautiful example. I mean, authors who have been bold enough, courageous enough, have tried to tap into this kind of writing, this kind of the creating of this effect. The Book of Job, right? The author of the Book of Job tells us the story, and he ends on, I think, this description of a kind of a glimpse. Again, you can argue that I'm using the word loosely or whatever, but in my reading of it, it's a kind of mystical experience that the book ends on, and he's describing the mystical experience by, pointing us at the grandeur of creation. And other authors, like the author of the Book of Job, have tried this. And the author that I'm currently thinking of right now is Victor Hugo, and specifically in Les Miserables. So let's pull up Les Miserables full text here. There's a beautiful passage in Les Miserables which I read as being very much in a similar vein to what's going on at the end of Job, filling a similar role and accomplishing a similar aesthetic and mystical kind of experience on the reader. So let's see if I can find the word that I'm looking for in my notes here. If I don't, I can do. Oh, here it is. This is good. I found it. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yes. Algebra applies to the clouds, right? This is beautiful writing from Victor Hugo. And he's writing this in the context of, I think, the love between Marius and Cosette. But the whole book of Les Miserables is pointing, I think, to there's like this interplay between, you know, the human drama, the human the revolution in France in the 1800s against King Louis Philippe at the time, the drama of love. Let me lower my volume on my computer. You're probably hearing that ring. Sorry about that. The drama of love, of the characters and the fighting of the characters, and the sense in which God holds all this, you know, from God's perspective, which is also from Victor Hugo's perspective, because Victor Hugo writes from this bird's eye view all the time, you know. There's a sense in which this drama, this human drama is held. And he points to that, I think, beautifully in his writing. So this is Victor Hugo describing reality, describing nature in a way which echoes to me the kind of same glimpse perspective, the infinite perspective of the end of Job. So, quote, algebra is applied to the clouds. The radiation of the star profits the rose. No thinker would venture to affirm that the perfume of the hawthorn is useless to the constellations. Who then can calculate the course of a molecule? How do we know that the creation of worlds is not determined by the fall of grains of sand? Who knows the reciprocal ebb and flow of the infinitely great and the infinitely small, the reverberations of causes in the precipices of being, and the avalanches of creation? The tiniest worm is of importance. The great is little, the little is great. Everything is balanced in necessity. Alarming vision for the mind. There are marvelous relations between beings and things. In that inexhaustible whole, from the sun to the grub, nothing despises the other. All have need of each other. He goes on. I don't want to read the whole thing because it will get it's a lot here, but maybe the last few sentences of this paragraph. Not everything, he says, in the vast cosmic exchanges of universal life, the universal life goes and comes in unknown quantities, rolling entirely in the invisible mystery of effluvia, employing everything, not losing a single dream, not a single slumber, sowing in animalcule, I don't know what that is, animalcule here, crumbling to bits a planet there, oscillating and winding, making a light a force and a thought an element, disseminated and invisible, dissolving all except the geometric point, the eye, bringing everything back to the sole atom, expanding everything in God, entangling all activity from summit to base in the obscurity of a dizzy mechanism, attaching the flight of an insect to the movement of the earth, subordinating who knows. We'll stop there. Beautiful writing, and pointing to this theme that exists in Les Mis, and that is also a theme for our lives. The theme in which the drama, the stage that we inhabit, the ups and downs, the roller coaster of pleasure and pain and good and bad and wants and desires and fears and this, that, is held. It's held in this infinite, capacious reality where everything belongs, where everything is okay in some sense. It's suffused by a kind of sense of okayness, by a sense of peace, which we don't always perceive, but we might catch a glimpse of, you know. It's tapping into that infinite, and this theme is not unique to this paragraph that I just read here, but throughout Les Mis, and some people who have been following my channel might know I've done a few videos on Les Mis not long ago, is deeply engaged with this perspective, this God's eye perspective. Okay, a comment here from Jason. We often describe sadness as feeling empty, as opposed to being filled with joy. This emptiness allows space, for a glimpse of a car. Yeah, of course. That's beautiful, and that's relevant, I think, in my own life and psychology. But that's a beautifully put, and I think of course that's true. The way in which an emptying out of experience, a sense of that emptiness, a sense of that void, a quietude, a relief from distraction. Putting away the noise of modernity and the noise of social media and the internet world, and finding that looking inward, and inward there might be a sense of emptiness. That's something that I can relate to, a sense of sadness, as Jason describes, a sense of feeling empty as opposed to being filled with joy. And I believe, yes, I believe that psychologically speaking, in that emptiness is the space where glimpses occur. Another angle on this whole discussion is that it seems to me, from my perspective, there's two ways to get at a glimpse. One way to get at a glimpse is through the silence, and that's the way which is I personally am most interested in. You can get at a glimpse by turning down the volume on the outside world. It seems. Of course, there's no guarantees in life, right? I mean, if you listen to teachers of meditation, for example, teachers of spirituality, the ones that I find most interesting, they'll tell you don't chase glimpses, right? Don't look for glimpses. They'll say that don't get attached to glimpses. It's not about glimpses, which I think is an important corrective here, right? I mean, an important way of orienting our lives. You shouldn't be chasing these things, but there's a potential, right? In quietude, in retreat, in isolation, in a lack of distraction, there's a potential, there's an openness, a receptiveness to the perspective of the infinite. And that's one way, that's one angle of getting the glimpse. But there's another way, it seems. And the other way, which actually, I didn't mention this, but is explicitly called out by William James in The Varieties of Religious Experience, which is this ebook here. He explicitly calls that. You can also get there by substances, right? Which is sort of like turning up the volume on a certain part of the glimpse part of the brain, okay? Substances, certain substances, specifically psychedelic substances, in certain contexts, in certain cases, under certain circumstances, in certain doses, seem to have the potential to give one access to a glimpse. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm less interested in this personally. I'm interested in it psychologically, philosophically. I'm interested in how this appears in literature, but in my own personal life, that's less interesting to me as a pursuit at this point, for reasons which we don't necessarily need to get into because it's not really about me. But that is, I think, the next source I want to look at. Let me check the comment here. Menel, do you think this perspective is found in Stoic philosophy and some Eastern thought? I think even Spinoza touched on this. I would say absolutely yes, because I would say, from what I've read, from what I believe, and people that I've spoken to are smarter than me, absolutely, this is not the domain of any one school of thought, right? I mean, that's the point. No religion or no philosophy has any monopoly on this. The perennialist project of William James, which I'm very sympathetic to, is the sense that we're talking about something very universal. And so I would expect, and indeed I find, it appears in many places, in many different schools of thought, in many different philosophies, in many different religions. I see it in Judaism, in the texts that I was raised upon. Specifically, I'm thinking of the way Maimonides talks about the spiritual experience as being like a lightning strike at night and illuminating everything instantaneously, and his methodology of tapping into that glimpse, which draws heavily on learning about science and learning about the natural world and sort of getting in touch with the infinity of the cosmos. But of course, you mentioned Spinoza, who's someone who absolutely, from what I've read, is deeply plugged into the sense of everything being God, everything, the universe being God, so to speak, all of nature, absolutely the same kind of thing. And you mentioned Stoicism. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I don't know enough about Stoicism, honestly, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. And if you want to elaborate on how Stoicism taps into this, I would love to hear. It'd be totally plausible to me. And of course, Eastern thought, I would say. A lot of Eastern thought, maybe, I don't know, it's complicated, right? But you could find it. You can find Eastern thought. I think you can find it everywhere. Like I mentioned before, when I say spiritual teachers say don't chase a glimpse, I find that also in Eastern thought. I find in Eastern thought the idea, specifically like readings that I've done around Zen Buddhism, for example, where the practice, the project of sitting in the silence and the separation is ultimately what matters, and the glimpse is just a thing that happens, that you don't get attached to. But I think that's just one small set of words that I've read on the topic. But of course, it's it's an Eastern thought. I think it's everywhere. All right, so now I mentioned drugs as another element of this, and I mentioned that William James writes about that. So let's see if I can find that really quickly, because I found it so funny just the way William James presented it. If it takes me more than 30 seconds to find it, we might have to give up. But I think he talks about like even alcohol as just sort of allowing people to tap into this experience. All All right, we're not going to search for it because I don't remember exactly where it is. That's okay. But it's just funny to me that William James, like talks about alcohol and nitrous oxide here, right? So I made some observations on this aspect of nitrous oxide intoxication, and reported them in print. One conclusion was forced upon my mind at that time, and my impression of its truth has ever since remained unshaken. It is that our normal waking consciousness, as we call it, is but one special type of consciousness. Whilst all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different, right? So again, you can read this for your own, it's beautiful. But the idea being that substances also are a way to tap into this. So let's look at a beautiful quote from Oliver Sacks. If anyone doesn't know who Oliver Sacks is, I highly recommend him. He was a writer that I got into from a young age and has stayed with me my whole life. He was a neurosurgeon. Let me take a quick drink here. All right. Oliver Sacks was a neurosurgeon. Let's pull up his Wikipedia page really quick. He died just a few years ago. He wrote a lot of brilliant books. Yeah, he died in 2015. Wow, time flies. Oh my God, I would not have guessed 2015. Towards the end of his life, he published an autobiography or a memoir. I think it's called On the Road. And yeah, he lived such an interesting life. I'd read his books. I'd read, Awakenings, A Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Some of, other books like Some of an Anthropologist of Mars. I own a bunch of his books, which is unusual because I don't own that many books, to be honest. And such a beautiful, brilliant writer about aberrations of the mind, the way in which the ways in which manifest all sorts of strange aberrations. So like The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat is a collection of stories, case studies, one of which is a man, I think it's called the Lost Sailor, who can't form memories. He has like this short-term memory loss, so he only lives like in the present moment. The titular story, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, is a man who's actually an artist who paints. He loses the ability to identify objects, which is amazing when you think about it, right? Because he could see color, he could see things, he could see lines. He still paints, but he doesn't really know what things are anymore. So of course the implication of he wants to go get his hat and he like reaches for his wife, right? Because he can't identify what an object is correctly. Amazing stuff. And when you read his memoir, why am I not seeing it here? I think it's called On the Road or something, right? Oh, On the Move, a Life, yeah. A second autobiography. He lived a really hard life, and drugs were a big part of his life, and he was self-medicating. I think a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain in his autobiography around his sexuality, and his mother rejected him because he was homosexual. Really sad stuff. Anyway, beautiful writer, and he has a book called Hallucinations. And in Hallucinations, he tells a story that usually he writes about his patients. By the way, just to quickly call this out, Awakenings was a movie, right? Awakenings, if you don't know about Oliver Sacks, a lot of people know the movie Awakenings, has Robin Williams in it. Yeah, so anyway, he's pretty famous from this movie, I think. Okay, moving on, though. He has a story in Hallucinations, which I want to look at, which is a fascinating story. Let's see if I can pull it up. Here we go. Oh. No problem. We're going to have to search for it. Okay, so let's search for it. It's Oliver Sacks. All right. Oliver Sacks. Shoot. I thought I had the link. I don't, but we're going to find it. Hallucinations. Quotes. Yikes. What was it? He wanted to see... What was the color he wanted to see? What happened? Okay. Well, all right. I'll tell you the story. It's a beautiful story, and I'll describe it to you. He wanted to see the color... hallucinations... Okay. Quote... Launchpad. This should help us find. Here we go. I found it. Ah, I know. Indigo. I was struggling to find the word indigo. If I remember the word indigo, I'd have found it really fast. Okay. I found it, though. Apologize for the delay. Beautiful quote. I had long wanted to see true indigo. This is Oliver Sacks talking about his own experience. He wanted to see true indigo. He thought that drugs might be the way to do it. I thought that drugs might be the way to do this. So one sunny Saturday in 1964, I developed a pharmacologic launch pad consisting of a base of amphetamine for general arousal, LSD for hallucinogenic intensity, and a touch of cannabis for a little added delirium. About 20 minutes after taking this, I faced a white wall and exclaimed, I want to see indigo now. Now. And then, as if thrown by a giant paintbrush, there appeared a huge, trembling, pear-shaped blob of the purest indigo. Luminous, numinous. It filled me with rapture. It was the color of heaven. The color, I thought, which Giotto had spent a lifetime trying to get but never achieved. Never achieved, perhaps, because the color of heaven is not to be seen on earth. Right? There's echoes here of the last chord. He sees what can only be seen in heaven. But it had existed once, I thought. It was the color of the Paleozoic sea. The color the ocean used to be. I leaned toward it in a sort of ecstasy, and then it suddenly disappeared, leaving me with an overwhelming sense of loss and sadness that had been snatched away, right? We talked about this, the sense in which there's a sense of loss afterwards. But I consoled myself. Yes, indigo exists, and it can be conjured up in the brain. For months afterwards, I searched for indigo, right? It reminds me of the lost chord again. I turned over little stones and rocks near my house looking for it. I examined specimens of azurite in the Natural History Museum, but even they were infinitely far from the color I had seen. And then in 1965, when I moved to New York, I went to a concert in the Egyptology Gallery of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. In the first half, a Monteverdi piece was performed, and I was utterly transported. So the aesthetic experience here, right? Of course, the experience of indigo, yeah, is all aesthetic. I had taken no drugs, but I felt a glorious river of music, 400 years long, flowing from Monteverdi's mind into my own. In this ecstatic mood, I wandered out during the intermission and looked at the ancient Egyptian objects on display, lapis lazuli, amulets, jewelry, and so forth, and I was so enchanted to see glints of indigo. I thought, thank God, it really exists. During the second half of the concert, I got a bit bored and restless, but I consoled myself, knowing that I could go out and take a sip of indigo afterward. It would be there waiting for me. But when I went out to look at the gallery after the concert was finished, I could see only blue and purple and mauve and puce, no indigo. That was nearly 50 years ago, and I have never seen indigo again. An amazing description from someone who is not religious of a glimpse. And in this case, it's one inspired by his, at least the first time around, by a pharmacologic launchpad. An amazing example. Take a quick pause here to make sure I haven't gotten too many important messages. Looks like I'm okay. And to consult my notes here, to think about where we can go next. And also to take a drink of water. Okay. Yeah, I mean, of course, once we talk about, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but once you open up this rabbit hole of drugs and glimpse, I mean, there's a whole world there. There's 5 live streams to be had about, drugs and glimpses, and there are all sorts of YouTube channels and books that have, explored this topic much more deeply than, I could possibly do. For one thing, I don't have any direct experience with these things. But that you can read articles. This is an example here. Let me pull up a quick article here from the New York Times from a few years ago. How psychedelic drugs can help patients face death. A fascinating article. You have people who have. Let's see here. If I have my New York Times subscription. You have people who are anxious about end of life, and are given LSD in a particular setting, and their anxiety goes away, and it's an amazing thing. It raises deep philosophical questions, existential questions, and there's a sense of tapping into something here, and I'm gonna stop here. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but there's a lot to be said. And there's people who have PTSD who can tell you stories about how these kind of treatments and therapies have saved their life. And it seems like an amazing thing that, again, at the risk of further divorcing this conversation of glimpses from religion and from God, there's a sense in which there's a potential for medicinalizing this experience almost. Someone who has an addiction or someone who has PTSD or someone who has anxiety about death to be given a glimpse experience as a healing, sort of revelatory, life-changing experience. And again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. There's a lot that can be said about this. There's a lot of things that have been written about this, but that's just sort of pointing the direction of where a conversation like this could potentially go. Jason, in the contemplative practice, I do conscious passivity. All right, conscious passivity is the goal. I have to leave, sure. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Might be those things alternate. Yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jason. So awesome to see you and say hi to you. For people who don't know Jason, you should, because he's a incredible content creator, and yeah, consider him a friend. Okay, so that was one sort of aspect. Where should we go next? Let's look at I did this already, and sort of just to circle back, Borges's whole library, his whole oeuvre, I think can be understood as being so unique and so powerful, because he's a writer who's deeply in touch with this experience of the glimpse. So The Aleph is an amazing short story, highly recommended to everyone who hasn't read it yet. But you have these two sort of frenemies, right? These guys, this guy who dated this girl who died, and the girl's brother is like sort of friendly with Borges, but they don't really get along, and the guy is constantly giving Borges poetry to read. And anyway, at one point, this friend of Borges says, "Come to my basement, I have to show you my Aleph that I have." And the Aleph is this portal into an apprehension of the infinite, right? Let's pull that up, actually, because the description is so powerful. Borges, the Aleph. This is really an amazing description of the glimpse. He says this. He peers into this portal, and he sees. What does he see? Each thing was infinite. I distinctly saw it from every angle of the universe. I saw the teeming sea. I saw daybreak and nightfall. I saw the multitudes of America. I saw a silvery cobweb in the center of a black pyramid. I saw a splintered labyrinth. I saw close-up, unending eyes watching themselves in me, as in a mirror. I saw all the mirrors on earth, and none of them reflected me. I saw in the backyard of Solar Street the same tiles that 30 years before I'd seen in the entrance of the house in Fray Buentos. I saw bunches of grapes, snow, tobacco, loads of metal, steam. I saw convex equatorial deserts, and each one of their grains of sand. I saw a woman in Inverness whom I shall never forget. I saw her tangled hair. I saw her tall figure. I saw the cancer in her breast. I saw a ring of baked mud in the sidewalk. Take a quick drink here. Skipping. I saw horses with flowing manes on a shore of the Caspian Sea at dawn. I saw the delicate bone structure of a hand. I saw the survivors of a battle sending out picture postcards. I saw in a showcase in Mirzapur a pack of Spanish playing cards. I saw the slanting shadows of ferns on a greenhouse floor. Skipping. I saw the coupling of love and the modification of death. I saw the Aleph from every point and angle. And in the Aleph, I saw the earth, and in the earth, the Aleph, and in the Aleph, the earth. I saw my own face and my own bowels. I saw your face, and I felt dizzy and wept, for my eyes had seen that secret and conjectured object whose name is common to all men, but which no man has looked upon, the unimaginable universe. This is, I think, Borges's, most famous, powerful description, of the glimpse, of tapping into that infinity. And the story goes on. The story doesn't end with the glimpse. There's drama that goes on and continues, and Amazingly, when he walks away, he doesn't even want to tell his host. He doesn't tell his host that he saw anything. So I saw nothing down there. As a way of sort of getting back at him because they don't really like each other. But it's an amazing thing, and it's so audacious and so powerful. This connection between the finite and the infinite that Borges can tap into. Comment here. Manahil says, "How do we ever know that this is state from our biology? There's states about right. How do we ever know that maybe the state from our biology is revealing something greater out there? Very possible, right? Can we content ourselves with knowing this may be manufactured feeling that we have that we give that feel is it maybe a manufactured feeling that we give significance? Yeah, that we give significance to. Sorry, I'm having a hard time reading your comment, but that's on me. Yeah, no, of course. Of course. I mean, that's the question. That's a question which I don't really want to delve into so much because that's the hard philosophical question. But to everyone, it's sort of an exercise again to the listener. What is the significance, so to speak? Is there something greater out there? Does the glimpse point to some deeper truth, or do we consider it just a quirk in the brain? And I don't think there's an easy answer to that question. I mean, if you to put my cards on the table, I don't want to hide behind the screen and say, whatever, all options are possible. I'm happy to tell you sort of where I stand on this. I think to some extent, glimpses do point to something, it's greater than us. They do point to this conversation that Borges, I think, so beautifully explores in his writing, this potential nexus between the finite and the infinite, or this Job perspective of being able to tap into that glimpse at infinite as a way of, getting a sense of okayness, a sense of peace with what is in the universe, as we saw also from Victor Hugo and on and on. I think there's something very profound and very real and very true there, and it shouldn't be just dismissed as like a quirk of brain chemistry or something like that. At the same time, I'm very wary of the ways in which glimpses are often used or put in service of religious fundamentalism in some cases, where glimpses become sort of co-opted as like this is the project, this is the ritual, this are the words, this is the belief, this is the dogma that you sort of have to have either to be on worthy of heaven, so to speak, to be worthy of the glimpse or be worthy of the infinite. So again, I think there's a balance there, that I think is important, where eschewing the fundamentalism that we can often see in all religious traditions, but recognizing the core of the spiritual, mystical instinct that I think is fairly universal to all human beings. So that would be sort of my perspective on that question. So Borges wrote extensively about this nexus, this connection point between the finite and the infinite. I think we can speculate. I think we can reasonably speculate that Borges himself had a glimpse. And I think we can reasonably speculate that he captured the essence of this glimpse in a poem that he wrote. And the poem is called Matthew 25:30. I don't know why, off the top. I mean, I've read this poem many times, and I've thought about this question before. I still can't tell you why the title is Matthew 25:30. This is the verse, cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't understand why that's the title. You can probably figure out good reasons. But what is this short little poem that Borges wrote? I see this as describing Borges's glimpse. The first bridge on Constitution, that's where he is. That's where he's standing. At my feet, the shunting trains trace iron labyrinths. He sees the trains beneath his feet. Steam hisses up and up into the night, which becomes at a stroke the night of the last judgment. From the unseen horizon and from the very center of my being, an infinite voice pronounced these things. Things, not words. This is my feeble translation, right? Again, it's ineffable. You can't put it into words. Time-bound of what was a single limitless word. And here we see echoes of the Aleph. Stars, bread, libraries of east and west, playing cards, chessboards, galleries, skylights, cellars, a human body to walk with on the earth, fingernails growing at nighttime and in death's shadows, for forgetting mirrors which endlessly multiply, falls in music, gentlest of all time shapes, borders of Brazil, Uruguay, horses in mourning, a bronze weight, a copy of Greater Saga, algebra on fire, the charge at Janine in your blood, days more crowded than Balzac, scent of honeysuckle, love, and the imminence of love, an intolerable remembering, dreams like buried treasure, generous luck and memory itself, where a glance can make men dizzy. All this was given to you, and with it ancient nourishment of heroes, treachery, defeat, humiliation. In vain have oceans been squandered on you. In vain the sun wonderfully seen through Whitman's eyes. You have used up the years, and they have used up you, and still you have not written the poem. Beautiful poem by Borges, describing a powerful experience. This takes us now, I think, to Moby Dick. I'm happy to take a quick breather here. I feel like I'm rushing. I feel like I'm running. A quick breather just to sort of, maybe just go over where we are, where we're at. We sort of talked about the characteristics of the glimpse, and maybe also to talk about where we're going to go, how we're going to wrap this up, because we've been going for a little while. The characteristics of a glimpse, the fact that they can't be expressed in language, the noetic quality, their transience, the sense of connection, quietness, sense of contact with the infinite, sense of loss when it's gone. We talked about a bunch of examples. We talked about, sources of the glimpse. The sources we talked about were like, silence, other side of suffering. We talked about, yes, of course, that was next on my list. Thank you, Menahil. Yes, I'm going to get to Pip. I think Pip has a glimpse. I think all of Moby Dick is suffused with glimpses. Yes, Pip definitely has a glimpse. I think Moby Dick is a book about retreat and a book about glimpses. Absolutely. Okay, we talked about the source of the other side of suffering. Also, we talked about drugs, substances. Examples are Arthur Sullivan's Lost Chord. There is, what was the other? Oliver Sacks's Indigo, right? Oliver Sacks's Indigo experience. And then there's, Job's response from God. Job's response from God, which we can maybe make a subcategory here, which is a kind of language and expression that we find in Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, has similar language. Has a similar effect, let's say. And then we talked about Borges. Borges's stories and poems. Yes, and I think now I'm ready to talk about Moby Dick. To talk about where we're going, we've covered a lot of ground here. I wanted to talk about Moby Dick. I wanted to talk maybe about the glimpse as a trope for ending certain books, but that would be pretty short. And then I wanted to end with a thought that I don't want to spoil, so I'm not going to tell you what that is. Okay. But we've covered a lot of ground. So I think our main next point to look at is Moby Dick. I read Moby Dick as being totally obsessed with this issue, this question of the glimpse. Let me see if I can find my notes. I'm happy to do it from memory. Yeah, here we go. I found it. Great. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have to talk about Moby Dick. Let's talk about Moby Dick. Moby Dick has one of the most memorable and powerful openings, to the point, compelling, gripping openings of any book ever. I mean, maybe not ever, but I don't know, from what I can think of. Okay. Call me Ishmael, our narrator says. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse, and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. It is a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, and especially when my hypos get such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off, then I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. Okay? The book opens and says that I was going through a crisis. We had this understated language, of Ishmael. He's going through a deep crisis. He's depressed. He feels he's a mess. I mean, his hypos, he's grim about the mouth. There's a damp, drizzly November in his soul. He's pausing before coffin warehouses and following funerals around, and he's trying to pick fights with people. And he describes himself as being, suicidal. Cato throws himself upon his sword, right? He's basically suicidal. He's a mess. And he needs a reset. And that's what this book is about. Everything that follows is Ishmael trying to get a reset on his life, on his mind. And he does it by retreat, by going on retreat. And this isn't something which a lot of people might have experience with. I have a little bit of experience, not for long-term retreats or a whaling voyage, but if you need to recalibrate your mind, if you need to find balance in your soul and in your life, what you could do is you can go on retreat. You can isolate yourself from other people. You can try to find quiet and live with yourself for a while and see how that goes and what comes up and sort of heal from that experience. That is the setting of Moby Dick. Yeah, let's see here. We have a comment here. Menhill says, "In the sea alone when he's stranded. To this day, one of the..." Yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's the Pip glimpse. Yes, which we're going to get to in a second. This life trajectory intersects with someone else. It intersects with Captain Ahab, who's the captain of the ship. And he also is going to sea, and he's going to sea for a very different reason. He's trying to catch the white whale, Moby Dick. And Captain Ahab explains why he's going to sea in exchange with Starbuck. So he describes, that he wants to, get revenge on Moby Dick, who stole, bit his leg off. And Starbuck cries, "Vengeance on a dumb brute, that simply smote thee from blindest instinct. That's madness." He says it's blasphemous. And so Captain Ahab responds, and he says, "All visible objects, man, are but as pasteboard masks, right? In each event, in the living act, the undoubted deed, there some unknown but still reasoning thing puts forth the moldings of its features from behind the unreasoning mask. If man will strike through the mask. How can the prisoner reach outside except by thrusting through the wall? To me, the white whale is the wall. Shove near to me." There's the other mission of this voyage, in addition to Ishmael's goal of sort of recalibrating his psyche, is this megalomaniacal maniac Ahab, who's trying to punch through reality and sort of get a glimpse of ultimate reality. So striking at God, trying to tear through the pasteboard mask of the world. And so much of Moby Dick is filled with this metaphysics. The book is suffused with metaphysics. At every chapter, this question of what is ultimate reality, what is behind the pasteboard mask, comes up again and again. It would take too long to go through all the examples, but one quick example just to look at before Ishmael goes on the voyage. He's talking about his feelings. He's looking at coffins. He's looking at a list of names of people who died at sea. And he says, of course, he feels very anxious, right? So he's looking at tombs of people who've died at sea. So it needs scarcely to be told what feelings on the eve of a Nantucket voyage I regarded those marble tablets, right? He's looking at coffins. And of course he's anxious, right? He's about to go on a sailing voyage, he says. And by the murky light of that dark and doleful day read the fate of the whalemen who had gone before me. Yes, Ishmael, the same fate may be thine, but somehow I grew merry again. Delightful inducements to embark, fine chance for promotion it seems. Skipping. Yes, there is death in this whaling business, a speechlessly quick, chaotic bundling of a man into eternity. But what then? Methinks we have hugely mistaken this matter of life and death. Methinks that what we call my shadow here on earth is my true substance. Methinks that in looking at things spiritual, We are too much like the oysters observing the sun through the water, and thinking that thick water the thinnest of air. Methinks my body is but the lees of my better being. In fact, take my body, who will take it, I say. It is not me. And then he says, come a stove boat. Stove just means, I guess is a kind of boat. And stove my body means destroy my body when they will. For stave my soul, Jove himself cannot. My soul is immortal. Throughout the whole book, there's a sense of this. There's something behind what we see. It comes up in the section of the whiteness of the whale, like the charnel house. Nature paints like the harlot, whose allurements cover nothing but the charnel house within. And when we proceed further and consider the mystical cosmetic, which produces every one of her hues, the great principle of light forever remains white or colorless in itself. The palsied universe lies before us a leper. There's a sense of the unknowability of reality. There's something hidden. There's something you can't see. There's the section of the weaver god. The weaver god. He weaves, and by his weaving he is deafened. He hears no mortal voice, and by the humming we too look on the loom are deafened. There's a sense of you can't hear. We're like the oysters who can't. We take the water to be the air. We can't see. We're blind. Ahab is on this mission to get access to ultimate reality. Ishmael is searching for quietude, and ultimately it's Pip, as Manahill in the comments pointed out, who gets the glimpse, right? Who has the experience. I mean, to some extent, Ishmael does as well. There's beautiful poetic descriptions of his, deep philosophical experiences on, looking out over the vastness of the ocean. But Pip has like the encounter with the infinite. Pip is the one who comes back from sort of seeing the Aleph, so to speak. And so that is, the famous glimpse in Moby Dick. It says, Treadle of the Loom. Here we go. So Pip falls over the boat, and he's left in the sea. And we're told the sea had jeeringly kept his finite body up, but drowned the infinite of his soul. Not drowned entirely, though, rather carried down alive to wondrous depths, where strange shapes of the unwarped primal world glided to and fro before his passive eyes, and the miser merman wisdom revealed his hoarded heaps. And among the joyous, heartless, ever juvenile eternities, Pip saw the multitudinous God omnipresent, coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. He saw God's footprint upon the he saw God's foot upon the treadle of the loom and spoke it, and therefore his shipmates called him mad. So man's insanity is heaven's sense, and wandering from all mortal reason, man comes at last to that celestial light, which to reason is absurd and frantic, and weal or woe feels then uncompromised, indifferent as is God. And that is the amazing, amazing glimpse that Pip has in this world on the sailing voyage, where everyone is focused on, is aware of the sense in which the world is an illusion. The world is this pasteboard mask. Everything is not, like Ishmael says in the beginning. We're like the oysters who only have access to the water. We can't see the ultimate reality. There's awareness of that, of the potential for that glimpse. And then Pips has this experience, and he comes back mad. And so that's how I read Moby Dick. This story of retreat, this story of isolating ourselves to find that quiet, and of course intersecting with the maniac Ahab, who's trying to find ultimate reality by conquering Moby Dick, the whale, and then this amazing sort of description of the glimpse that Pip has. The next thing I have in my notes here, getting towards the end of our time, is the way in which the glimpse I feel is a trope. There's the glimpse as a literary trope. There's a lot of books that that don't really seem to know how to end, and so they end on a glimpse. So almost, it's sort of, and I could think of a bunch of examples. I don't really feel like going too deep into this this rabbit hole. It's the kind of thing where I think if you know to look for it, you see it pretty often. It's not uncommon. But if you have either a fiction book or a nonfiction book, and there's a lot of drama, And I feel like the author doesn't really know how to end it. A way in which they end it is like, the main character or the author, going out and sort of being overwhelmed by nature, So let's see here. If I pull up my books, is it worth? Yeah, let's see if I can pull up really quick. Is it worth pulling up here? Why does the world exist? At the end of Why the World Exists is like an example of that. The author, Jim Holt, he's gone on this whole long philosophical exploration of different theories, different philosophical theories, mathematical theories, talking to all these philosophers, trying to come up with reasons for why the world exists. As from a reader perspective, I could tell you that it all feels very unsatisfactory. I don't know, maybe Jim Holt feels like he nailed it. He maybe explained everything, but from my perspective, it feels super unsatisfactory. So how does Jim Holt end his book? After all these pages and pages of deep philosophy, I switch off the TV. This is the last paragraph of the book. I switch off the TV and go out into the chill Paris night for a stroll and smoke. Leaving my building, I turn toward the sign. A short block away, just across the water, looms the back of Notre Dame with its flying buttresses. I walk along the quay downriver for a bit until I get to this other place, Pont des Arts, my favorite bridge. Since it has no traffic and is thus, aside from the buskers, quiet, I go halfway across the bridge where I pause to light a cigarette and take in the view of Paris at midnight. Before me stretches a gorgeously illuminated patch of the great, I don't know how to pronounce that unfortunately, Vasite, that the Buddhist monk had spoken of. Is it really an insubstantial dream, an empty illusion? Is it gross and viscous and absurd, as Sartre held, or is it a divine gift, as the Dominican priest was just saying, or could the whole thing just be an inexplicable quantum fluke? I flick my cigarette butt into the dark waters below and head home, right? He says, I think to myself, it really is awfully mysterious. This ending the book on sort of like this semi-spiritual experience of tapping into the mystery of reality. And this is quite common. I have other places, other books where I think this happens, but I don't feel necessarily like calling them out right now because it does feel a little bit like a criticism, and it sort of is like a criticism of those books. And I don't want to do that, but I think if you sort of look for this kind of an ending, you sort of see it everywhere. It's like a light kind of glimpse, to end the book. Personally, I'm not such a fan of that kind of ending, and in the books where I see that, I'm usually not so enamored with those books, so I don't feel like calling out those authors right now. I think we did well. I want to end on a thought. Related to Jim Newman. Jim Newman is a guy who makes hosts gatherings. I find him very interesting. I like his gatherings a lot. I'll pull him up on YouTube. If this works. Let's see if this works. He's on YouTube. If you search for him, this is the guy, and there's lots of people like him, and I think of him as like an anti-guru. I've interviewed him on my channel, actually. You can find, if you go to my videos, my interview with him. And in that interview, I asked him, what's his message about? And the first thing he said, it was very cryptic. And a lot of people spoke to me afterwards saying they didn't know what he was talking about. And so I sort of want to explain what he was talking about. He opened saying, my message is that this is that. That's what he said. He said, this is that. He said, what is longed for is this. That's what Jim Newman's message is. And he's not the only one. Jim Newman is one guy in a philosophical tradition. It's called Neo-Advaita, or it's a very pure form of Advaita. Other people in the tradition are definitely Yuji Krishnamurti. Oh, thanks so much, Manu. That's so generous. Yeah, thank you for the donation. Yeah. Other people in this tradition are Yuji Krishnamurti, who I love. And there's others. And these are people who have this message that this is that. That's the message. And what does that mean? A lot of people came to what is he talking about? Jim Newman. What is Yuji Krishnamurti talking about? And they host, Jim Newman hosts these gatherings, other people as well. He's not, like I said, he's not so unique. They host these gatherings. And spiritual seekers come to him. Okay? And if you watch these gatherings, spiritual seekers will come to him and they'll say, listen, I've been seeking, I've had glimpses. What do I need? How do I recover that? How do I achieve enlightenment? How do I find that glimpse again? How do I find that sense of okayness, that sense of peace, that sense of silence? And what Jim Newman responds, and what U.G. Krishnamurti responded to people, is that this is that. This is the glimpse. This, what's happening right now, is the glimpse. There's nothing, whatever you're longing for, whatever you're trying to attain is just this. And there's different ways you can, it's all hard to put into words. And, Jim Newman's ability is that he's able to talk to people in this way. But, the kind of the language is, that was the no self feeling like no self. And this is no self feeling like whatever it feels like. There was a moment in a recent meeting, which I thought was very struck by, this was in New York City, actually. I sort of wanted to attend, but it wasn't convenient with my schedule and family obligations. But a guy in the meeting, he says, I feel really anxious. Or he said he was scared. He said he feels a threat, vulnerable, He said, how do I, what do I do about that? And Jim Newman's response is always, that is it. There's nothing that needs to change. That is the glimpse. That is the ultimate reality. And I think for a lot of people, this message is not helpful. It's not useful. It's not, you don't get anything from the message. A lot of people, of course, Jim Newman will tell you, and you can watch videos of this with U.G. Krishnamurti and others. A lot of people get very upset at this message, and they yell and, storm out of the room and whatever. This is not a message that anyone can appreciate or hear. But I think in some cases, for some people, there could be receptiveness to that. That, an attunement to this moment, just a relaxing into this moment, is really all there is. And yeah, I'm sort of speaking out of my wheelhouse now. I'm punching above my own weight because I'm just not really qualified or prepared to talk like this. But I think that's a beautiful message, and I think it's a way of framing, characterizing glimpses altogether. It's not something out there to be chased. It's not something to dedicate your life looking for. To go to fancy places and talk to fancy people. But everything is just that. And again, it might not be a message which resonates or is meaningful to anyone or most people, but I think there, at least for me, and I think for many people, there could be receptiveness to that. And I think it's an important orientation to take to these questions. Anyway, that's the end of my notes. That's all I had prepared for today. I think we did a nice exploration of glimpses. And yeah, I'm ready to call it. Thank you to everyone who stopped by and conversed. Mount Hill is wonderful, awesome talking to you, and to Jason and to everyone else. Maybe I will do it again sometime. Have a great day.